Record. And I have really been looking forward to this discussion. I don't remember when I first heard the term eldercare mediation, but when I learned about it, I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And I was chatting with Paula Gibson, who is an elder care mediator, and the two of us were chatting. I was like, we have not done a discussion on this platform on elder care mediation. And I know that a lot of people don't know what this is. And so I am super excited to welcome Paula Gibson to the stage, who is an elder care mediator. And we're going to learn all about how this practice helps people resolve problems and find solutions. Paula, real excited to have you here today. And and something that I know we're going to joke around with, but we might as well get it right out. And this is elder care mediation, not elder care meditation.
That's it.
So all of those folks that came here for meditation, please don't leave because you're going to really learn a lot, and you're going to learn about mediation. Um, Paula, before we dive into this interesting topic, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into this.
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank you, Steve, for having me on this program. You do so much for the community to educate and inform people, and most importantly, to support people. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you things that I've learned and what I do and how I came to this and with a way to helping other people. But basically, I was a civil litigator. And so I was practicing in a big law firm. We were doing insurance coverage litigation, and we were representing plaintiffs going after their insurance companies, which, as you can imagine, was very contentious, a lot of litigation, a lot of briefs being filed, what have you. But I was always sort of the attorney who was like taking the pro bono case. Oh, can I volunteer here or there? Because I really like the interaction that you have when you actually have clients that you can physically see and be around, and the support. And so, as I navigated being an attorney and then having children and then having a child with special needs, I had to figure out ways to have legal work for me in my schedule, because that was very demanding to juggle all of that. So I started getting certified as a mediator in DC Superior Court, where I was working in the family law division, in the multi-door division. And so I was having clients who were going through contentious divorces and focusing on custody and what have you. Then I had a family crisis. So my mother, who lives in California with my father, out of the blue had a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis. And she was taking care of my father, who was older. He had sort of signs of, early dementia onset. And so the siblings in my family, the 4 of us, lived in every corner of the country: Hawaii, Tennessee, Connecticut, DC. And we all had to come together to figure out a plan for our parents. And so I used all of my skills as the family court mediator to deal with my family. And so we navigated through a lot of difficult issues, as caring for our parents would entail. And so I realized then and there, like, I could really use what I've learned personally to help other people, because a lot of my friends my age, I'm in that tender age, post 55, where we're dealing with taking care of our parents. They call us, some of us, the sandwich generation. And so I wanted to share what I had learned and experienced with other folks. And during COVID, because I was homebound and dealing with online mediations anyways in Superior Court, I thought, why not do this on my own here and reach other people, not only just doing family law, but also elder care mediation, because I could really support people who are going through the exact same thing that I went through. And so I wanted to be a source of help and hope for people.
Wow, what a great story. And you'd mentioned, I mean, it sounds like the stars really aligned that, as an attorney, not really into the litigation. I've heard
Right.
this time and time again, but developing those skills that a litigator needs to have to resolve problems and things of that nature. But then having a child with a disability and going through this with your own family. Sounds like you found the perfect profession here. So this is really exciting. So okay, well let's dive into the question that I'm sure it's on my mind, but it's on everybody's mind is what is elder care mediation, and how long do you have any sort of historical roots on when all this profession started?
That's a great question. It's been out there for over 20 years, maybe closer to 30 actually. And so not a lot of people do it. It's one of these kind of subspecialties that even some attorneys that I've interfaced with were like, what's that? How do you do that? Why would I need someone like you? But basically, what elder care mediation is working with families or individuals who are dealing with an aging adult. And something is going on with the aging adult where they need a lot more support. Maybe they're not able to live on their own anymore. Maybe they're having financial issues and how to balance their checkbooks because maybe they're losing memory. But they're dealing with a host of issues that someone has noticed who's close to them. Usually it's a family member who's like, oh, dad, he's not taking his meds anymore. He didn't remember my name yesterday, or whatever some of the, signs are that something needs to change. And so I'm interfacing with typically siblings of this aging adult and trying to figure out a plan of how to help and support them.
And I imagine that the something that you hear a lot of, because I hear a lot of this in my travels, is after the fact, somebody is telling me a story about their elder care challenge. And it's sort of like, oh, you could have hired an aging life care manager. Oh, you could have had a daily money manager. It's like, I wish somebody, a patient advocate, I wish somebody would have told me this, and I imagine, especially in this area where it's sort of like, oh, you do what? Shoot, me and my sister, we don't even talk to each other anymore
Right.
because of what we went through in caring for our mom. So uh, you know what might be a really interesting thing, and I don't want to take you by surprise on this, but can you walk us through without any breach of confidentiality, like
Mhm.
a case that you may have done and how it was resolved and the different techniques that y'all applied?
Okay. Well, so typically someone will come to me, whether it's someone who's maybe a realtor or maybe an aging life care manager or even a contact in the neighborhood. And they're dealing with sibling issues. We cannot communicate. I've not talked to my sister in Nevada since forever. We need some help. And so somebody makes that initial email or call to me. And so what I try to do is I do kind of an intake where I kind of try to get the story as best I can, all the while knowing that I'm going to be talking with other people. So this is just one version of a story that I might be hearing, because the next person that I speak with might have an entirely different understanding of what the issues are or what needs to be addressed. And so then I then get the names of people that I should speak with, and then I will talk with them and explain why they've been contacted by me. A lot of times somebody will know that I'm going to be contacting them, but I explain what the process of mediation is. And I talk about the fact that, first of all, it's a voluntary process, that there's no court order requiring you to be here. Yes, I'm an attorney, but I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm actually just talking to you about options and trying to get all of you to communicate about what you want for your parents or your parent or your loved one. And so I also talk about how it's a neutral process. I'm not a judge or a jury trying to decide something for you. It's about getting you to communicate and talk with one another about solutions and ideas that might work. And then it's also a confidential process. So some people are afraid that, oh gosh, if I tell her something or if they hear about this, they're going to use it against me or whatever the situation may be. But everything that happens in mediation stays in mediation. So it gives people comfort to know that it's a confidential process. So then there's maybe buy-in for mediation. People are willing to give it an attempt. And so, the process is you sign an agreement to mediate. That just means you're going to follow the rules of mediation. You're going to be respectful. You're going to talk with the mediator. You're going to disclose information. There may be a need to get some financial information or some medical information, and you sign all of that in an agreement to mediate so that I'm not violating any confidentiality matters either. So I have people's permission. It's called informed consent to do that. And so then I usually meet with each party separately. So I might meet with the daughter, a brother, and I get their story first in their version. And then I develop a list of topics of what's important, what people want to talk to. And so then once I understand kind of what the issue is, we figure out where we're going to meet. That's really important. And oftentimes, even though the mediation is about the elder person, they're not there usually because they're either in a situation where they're unable to communicate or they don't have the capacity or it would be too stressful for them to participate. But when I can, I try to meet with them. And if they're local, I can meet with them in person to try to understand where they're at and if they have an understanding of what is going on. And if I'm able to do that, that's great because I get information about what's important to them and whether they want to participate in the mediation or not. Because you really want to have all the critical people at the table when you mediate. You don't want to leave out a brother who's upset and he doesn't want to be a part of it, but maybe he's a trustee of the trust. He'd be a really important person to be at the mediation. So you want to go forward with all the people who need to be at the table in the mediation.
Now, I want you
No,
to
go
keep
ahead.
going, but you said something that kind of, in all these conversations I've had with family members, sometimes let's say that you've got two or three siblings and they're not getting along. And I could see where one person, like, no way, I'm not going. Like, does that happen where you might have one party that really should be there, but they refuse to buy into the concept of a mediator?
Yes, and that's tricky to deal with because you really want there to be group buy-in because you don't ever want it to appear as if you have some siblings ganging up against the other sibling because in the end that can backfire and that might defeat the whole purpose of mediation. So there could be an incident where I'd say, I really need to have sibling number 3 there. He's doing this, he's doing that. I, as a mediator, can't go forward because a very important voice is not here to participate. But what I really try to do is I try to, persuade the person who's maybe fearful of mediation, or there's something else that's prohibiting that person from participating. And it may not be because he dislikes the sisters, but maybe there's an underlying issue of like, well, that used to be my role. Mom always relied on me, and now it's that sister. So I feel hurt.
Yeah.
And so I try to sort of work with that person to understand what the reasons are as to why they won't be there. And then once they recognize the fact that I've heard them, yes, it sounds like there's been a lot of hurt in the past, or this used to be your job, and that must be a big change for you, isn't it? They start feeling like someone's heard their hurt, their pain. And then once that's labeled and identified, they're more willing to participate and realize that it's really in the best interests for the family to support mom or dad or whomever it is in this process by at least at a minimum sitting together in a mediation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned aging life care managers as a profession that often gives you referrals that you work with. And one of the interesting things about aging life care managers is when a sibling or when an adult child calls up the aging life care manager, a lot of times they think, oh, I'm going to hire an aging life care manager to take care of mom. And the aging life care managers are always very clear. You might be paying this bill and you may think that I'm listening to everything you're saying, but the client is your mom, is that I am working for your mom in her best interest, not what you want to have happen. You might get lucky and this happens. I can see where your profession and that profession works in alignment because through doing a mediation, we can now the loved ones can now sort of accept the decision making that mom may be making as an adult as well.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's always important to remember, like, who is the client? It's not necessarily who is paying, who is the client, who are we working to support, and how does that work? So you
Yeah.
always have to think about that.
Oh man, really great question here from Jamie. Do you mediate with older adults and facility or community staff? Again, Jamie, I'm glad you brought that up because I get these calls a lot from people who have a parent or they're living in a senior community and they just start complaining to me about an issue. Have you ever had cases here? And is this something where mediators come in?
Well, I have not had a case in that capacity where I'm dealing with an elder at a facility who wants to mediate with the facility. Not to say I wouldn't do that. I'd be happy to do that because I can imagine that there are issues that arise and I know that they're out there. Again, does the person know that that's even an option? So, and who would be that person who's calling me? Is it the residential place where the person lives, or is it the actual older adult? How does that work? But typically I'm working with the siblings of the older parent to help them.
Yeah, and I could again see where, and I'm glad because again, even though I'm aware of elder mediation, if an adult child is calling me regarding their issues with a community, which happens on a regular basis, a lot of times what I am referring them to, and uh, I'm going to drop this into chat, is the long-term care ombudsman program in their
Mhm.
region.
Mhm.
But that's in general can be a volunteer program. I mean, it may or may not. The level of training of the volunteers that are advocating on behalf of our loved ones, their time may be limited, whereas you could see where calling somebody like you and saying, hey, here's the problem, let's see if this could be resolved with a mediator. And that leads us to another great question from Kelly that says, what training is required to become an elder care mediator?
Another great question. For just doing regular mediation, family mediation, one has to undergo a 40-hour training session. And then if you're specializing in a particular area, let's say for me doing divorce, it was, 20 hours of child custody, 20 hours of financial. And then with elder care mediation, there is no specific set of courses that you're supposed to have or any particular type of certification. So that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? Because you'd think like you'd have to, but I think people come into the elder care mediation space because they've been doing the family law mediation and they have undergone all that training. So it's sort of a natural extension. If your antenna is up or if you've had a personal issue with dealing with an older parent and some of the concerns that they had late in life, that you realize that this is an area that could really be ripe for helping people and assisting folks going forward.
Now, the training, you shared with me a website, the Academy of Professional Family Mediators. Is
Yes.
that where somebody would go if they were interested in becoming a mediator, or if they were searching for a mediator in that area? Is that the primary place that some would go?
Yes, that's a great place to go because a lot of family mediators would spill over into the elder care mediation arena. And again, you're not going to find a lot of them out there because it's not, a huge profession right now. But I expect it will be growing because of all of the people who are reaching a certain age who need support and families who want to help them but are unable to do so because there's been a lack of communication or estrangement or whatever the issues might be. So you can search that site, put in your zip code, or if you know a last name of somebody. But typically, that's a good place to start. I'd also recommend if you
Oh,
go to
find
a
a mediator. Okay, so
okay,
we could
yeah.
go here and they've got a directory, and let's see here. I'm gonna put my zip code and I will do a radius, and then it will bring up hopefully, whoops, what
What happened?
a lot of times these search engines are fickle here. Um there we go. There's 15 within a stone's throw of where I am, and we can see there you are, Paula Gibson. And then I imagine the key is because this is a new uh, practice area, it's kind of going through and looking to see if any of the mediator in your area has elder as something that they list as a specialty area. But
Right.
but Paula, you're based in Maryland as an elder care mediator. Um, you have clients all over the country because there's oftentimes family is spread all over the country. Have you done mediation where you never had a face-to-face meeting where you were able to do it all on the phone and Zoom and things
Yes,
like that?
yes. Most of my mediations are remote mediations, if very high percentage, because people find it to be really comfortable. They're in their own space. They can talk without having to be maybe next to the person that they have a problem with. And if the older adult is participating, they can also be connected in easily. But people really enjoy remote mediation, and I believe it creates a safer sense of security. But not that said, I also can travel to sort of a neutral space. Some people have me meet them at the church conference room and meet with family members there because it's nobody's home, but it's a neutral place. And I can do that as well if people are local. But most of the mediations I do are conducted by Zoom.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I tell you, I've found actually that I am able to focus and listen more to somebody when I'm online in an environment like this than if I'm in an office or a place where I'm like looking at the pictures and things like that. Um,
Right. Less
Althea
distractions.
Althea shared that also mediate.com is another place where there has a directory of people that are mediators.
Yes.
Thank you, Althea, for sharing that. And that's in chat for everybody there. Okay. The You gave me some resources before we started, and I was able to, I'll drop these into chat, but I was able to put together a little slide deck here, and I wanted to just kind of go through a few of these. So we've where to find an elder care mediator. We talked about the Academy of Professional Family Mediators. I shared that with everybody. This is something that I found was really interesting. There's the state of Maryland. This is a Maryland state website that uh recognizes mediators in the state. Is this something that most states have, like a directory of mediators? And how and why is the state involved in mediation? I'm assuming because it's a lower cost alternative to legal services.
Well, those are really great questions. The state has a huge interest in mediation because court dockets are jammed. If they can get people to resolve cases, they are very happy. So there could be guardianship cases, there could be trust battles, there are divorce issues. They don't want to clog up their dockets with intra-family dynamics that they can spend hours and hours, going nowhere in a courtroom. So they have mediators who have to take specialized training to be a mediator and to be on that website. You have to undergo a lot of training. So a lot of states do have a director of mediators. If it's not posted on the state court's website in your county courthouse, so in the Montgomery County Circuit Court would be where you would look, or the Maryland State site that you just posted, because they want people to use mediation. And it's getting to be more popular. I think as more people learn about mediation, they can realize, you know what? I can actually work with somebody to reach a solution rather than spend thousands of dollars litigating something where I may not get a result that I want because I'm not deciding it, a judge is. And so that's the beauty of mediation. You get to decide the results. You may not get everything that you want. And some people say mediation is a compromise. I don't see it that way. I see it as a solution because everybody is going to get something when you have a solution rather than people aren't getting everything, which is a compromise. So I try to spin it in a positive way so that people walk away from it feeling empowered and hopeful.
Great. Okay. Elva has a great question. I was waiting for this question, Elva, and she says, after 40 hours of training, and I have a master's degree, I served as a volunteer mediator for my county here in Texas, which is a free service to county residents. Wow, this is another great thing for people to know about. But she's curious to know how much Miss Gibson charges, and you can share that in round numbers, but I knew somebody was going to ask the question of how much does this cost?
Right, right. So depending on the situation, usually in a mediation, you bill by an hourly rate. And so in the, urban areas, it's usually anywhere from 250 to 475. I am in the 350 area, 300, 350. But the whole idea is that there's sliding fee scales too. So I also try to work with families who may have limited means. So if there is a need for mediation and there may not be able to afford my typical rate, I will try to work with families to try to support them because I feel like I want to provide that to people.
And we get this question for every profession, whether it be elder law, aging life care, daily money managers, senior move managers. And one of the things that I found in term that all professions, while when you hear, I can't believe that this profession charges this much per hour. Most professions like this are very they work within a person's budget to resolve the problem. And I've heard cases in aging life care management and otherwise where a couple of hours of just consultation made life better, and it enabled the person to also understand what this professional is doing and then order up more hours. Like, wow, that was the best $200, $300 that I ever spent. So thanks for answering that. Now, Elva is talking about a county in Texas where there's mediation, that's being offered by volunteers. And based on your response on the court system being clogged up, I can see where there may be some sort of programs across the country, not necessarily for elder care, but other small claims, hey, look, we're going to try to solve this with our volunteer mediators before
Right.
you file your court action. Is
Right.
that another way that mediators are being utilized?
Yes, exactly. In the lower courts and the district courts, like in Maryland, they have volunteer mediators who handle civil issues, and they are working pro bono. But in the more specialized areas, Maryland courts provide a stipend to the mediators so that they're able to be paid a little bit for their work. And so I'm also on their roster to do cases as well. And it's a stipend that they.
Okay. And then Kelly asks, where would I find mediation training courses and are they state specific? Now, you had mentioned the Academy of Professional Family Mediators, which I'm
Yes.
going to share
Yes.
their website. Um, is this the only trade association, or are there other trade associations for me?
No, really, the best way is to go to your state bar association. So every state has a bar association, whether you're in Texas or Massachusetts, Maryland, what have you. And you will be able to find trainings and information about trainings and mediation. In the family law context, it can be state specific depending on what you end up doing. In some jurisdictions, you can draft an agreement as a mediator and not be an attorney. In other jurisdictions, you can't do that. That's an unauthorized practice of law, and you can only do a memorandum of understanding.
Ah,
And so you have to be very careful with what hat you put on when you say you're a mediator and what you disclose, because I have to tell folks I'm an attorney, I'm a mediator, but I'm not working as your attorney. I'm working as your mediator. So therefore, I'm bound by mediation ethics. And so people need to understand that. So people get a memorandum of understanding from me, because if I were to write an agreement after a mediation session that's filed with the court, then I would be representing two adverse parties, and that's unethical.
wow. Well, check this out. I went to the on the APFM website, which I dropped
Uh-huh.
in there. There's a family mediation training and events calendar. And as I scrolled down, it looks
Oh, we
like
do.
yesterday
Yes.
there was
Yes.
actually some training on
Yes.
elder decisions.
And I'm working in that because as a mediator, it's really important to keep fresh and current on everything. So I'm participating in that, and it's a 6-week program. We're meeting every Tuesday for 5 hours, and it's wonderful because it gives you a chance. It's geared toward people who already have mediation experience, so you're not starting, from ground zero, but it's touching on all the issues that we all face, and it gives us all a forum to discuss and get resources about how did you handle this, what worked for you, what didn't work, and so it's really terrific. Um,
Great. And then Sandy had a great question. Do you need to be an attorney to become a mediator?
You don't, but a lot of them are, because oftentimes people need to understand what the law says, even though you're not giving legal advice, but you might need to state and have a good understanding of like, what is a guardianship proceeding? Why would my mother be considered in need of a guardian? And things that might deal in the financial world that deal with trusts, and just having the legal background is really helpful, but you don't have to be an attorney. I think the most important skill that you have is you have to be a really good listener.
Yeah, I
And,
was
and
gonna.
that's so hard for a lot of people.
Oh, for me, I actually just did a little blog post on that. It's like I have to catch myself. Steve, stop babbling. Look, I'm doing it right now. Okay. And I could see where therapists and life coaches and other professions that this could be an area where you might utilize your skill set. Um,
Right, right.
Okay. All right. I want to get back to your slide, the resources that you shared with me.
Oh, sure.
And I dropped all these into chat, but there was a couple of books that you are shared with us that I think will make some intriguing dialogue for us here. And that is you shared two books. Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate? And then Mom Always Liked You Best. And I'm going to drop those back in chat. Just I haven't read either one of these books, but their titles are so relevant and so intriguing. Um,
Right.
Tell us a little bit about why these are books that you've shared with us.
Okay, well, so Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate is all about sort of the dynamics of siblings and families when they have to deal with what's going to happen to all the parents' items that they own, their possessions, and all of those conversations and conflict that brings up. And it sort of addresses the issues head on with what you need to go through and be prepared to deal with when you're having to go through, favorite items according to everybody's wishes that they had. And so it's kind of a really nice way to get people familiar with the fact that, you know what, you're not really alone in all this. Other families have dealt with this exact same issue. And here's what the situation was with this family, and here's what could work for you. And the other book, Mom Always Liked You Best, is actually by Elder Decisions. And that's the group who's doing the training.
Oh,
And
wow.
it really, yeah, and even though it was published in 2011, it does walk through the process of elder mediation and what that entails, and sort of the skeletal framework to begin, and the basics about what it entails. And so they're a group up in Massachusetts, and they've been doing this since the early 2000s. So they have a nice little pocket of business up there.
Well, because you've got a relationship or a connection to the author of that book, Mom Always Liked You Best. We were talking about this before we turned on the camera that, doing a webinar on elder mediation, some people might have confused it with elder meditation, but
Right.
I love the idea of spotlighting and doing a discussion called Mom Always Liked You Best. Maybe we can get the authors of that book on. And so if you can help me make that connection, I would love to
Oh, I
have
would
them
be
back.
happy to do that. They're wonderful. And, I've met them for 10 hours so far, and they couldn't be kinder and more appropriate for your audience.
I love it. Okay, let's see. Althea says, I became a pro bono mediator at the LA Superior Court After a 50-hour basic training, the court also provided free training. I mediated many different civil cases for 10 years. It was a great training ground. I'm a non-attorney. Many communities have mediation programs and look for volunteers. But she says, and I think this is true with all professions, the only way to be an effective mediator is to mediate.
Right.
Yeah, and getting out there
Absolutely.
and practicing. Boy,
Yeah.
this is really I love these discussions because the our audience is clearly interested, and then also they've all had different experiences in different parts of the country. And as you
Right.
had mentioned, Paula, um, depending on what state you're in, there might be some sort of different hoops that a mediator needs to jump through.
Exactly. And
Uh,
whenever you're appointed by the court to be a mediator, you have to undergo a specific training. Usually it's in that jurisdiction.
I just glanced up at our list here and I see Catherine and Jason both have their hands up and might have a question. Uh, Sometimes this is an accident, but Catherine and Jason, if you have a question, I've prompted you to open up your mics, and more than happy to uh, let you verbally share whatever it is you're looking for, but also recognizing that a lot of times people just click that little hand raising button. Um, okay. Um, we've covered a lot of ground here, and the let me ask you something. It's sort of like with the mediation that you've done, uh, and obviously it's great that you're able to help people through these tough times, but is there any like themes or words of wisdom that you could share with us who are out there, struggling with conflict with the people around us, that could help us avoid ever talking to you or one of your colleagues or a lawyer? Like any sort of themes or kind of things that you've said that it's kind of like, let me tell you, if you can do X, Y, and Z in advance, you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches in life.
Right. Again, a good question. So in the elder care mediation arena, if you can have a conversation with your parents before they get sick or they have a diagnosis, talk to them about, Mom, I know that you may not always be in this house. What are your thoughts about the future and what you think you see happening? So you're having conversations while they're cognizant, they're healthy, they may be very happy. So you have a good understanding of what's important to them. And so it's also good to share that information with other siblings. And I always encourage people to make a plan. So that is, get the basics done, have an advance directive drafted and signed and witnessed, have a will done. Only 30% of people in this country have wills. And a will basically sets forth who's going to be in charge of distributing your things when you go. And you want to have possibly someone who's going to be your financial power of attorney. So if something happens to you, you become incapacitated, they're going to be able to do things on your behalf. Or it's a durable power of attorney and they can do things for you now. But it's really great to have all these things in place before a crisis hits, because when you have a crisis, I had a friend at a panel who said, you don't want to make decisions going downstairs on roller skates. It's always best to have a plan. And if you can talk with your family members about what's important to mom or dad before something happens, that would be really helpful. And just organizing those documents, getting them done, getting them located in a safe place where you can access them. The people who need to have them, if there's an emergency, can find your advance directive. They know what kinds of, instructions you'd like doctors to follow if you can't make decisions for yourself. It just solves a lot of problems and it takes out a lot of stress in the decision-making process when things happen.
Yeah, and you said something there that I think is very important, and it's getting the documents and having conversations and letting people know where those documents are. That's another thing that I've discovered in my travels and conversations is there are people that have the documents together, but they haven't talked about any of the things in the documents or shared with their circle where the documents are. I tell you folks, I'm dropping this into chat because all of our discussions that we have here on positive aging community blend together. But the one that I had yesterday uh, with the author of the Guide to Navigating Modern Meaningful Caregiving, she really talked about the conversations. And if you have the conversation, if you can have the conversations with your loved ones in advance, when you go to an attorney to actually have the official document drawn up, you're spending less money talking to the attorney. Like a lot of times, the first time people ever talk about this stuff is to the stranger, this attorney sitting
Right.
across the table with them.
Right, right. That's not the place we want to have the family squabbles because they're billing by the hour and the rate goes up a lot, it gets higher and higher the more the, squabbling is extended. And so if you can, meet with a mediator and come up with a plan, if you're not able to agree in advance and you have those conversations, you get some of these things in order. You have a to-do list, at least for me, walking out of the office, here's what you have to do and here's who you might be able to contact so that you're not spending a lot of time and resources, meeting with a stranger, like you said, and trying to figure out what we need to have done. Instead, you're walking in with the plan. Here's what we'd like to have done. Can you advise us on what's the best way to draft a trust or the best way that we can have an advance directive that's going to do A, B, and C? That's really helpful for people to have.
Wow, I love it. We really covered a lot of ground here today. Is there anything, Paula, that you can think of that we haven't really talked about that you'd want people to know about elder mediation or resolving issues and complaints and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think people need to know that, elder care mediation exists. And if you get to a point where you really don't know what to do, you're having conflict with siblings, a mediator really can help. And you shouldn't be afraid to open up to somebody who's neutral, who might be able to, hear you and figure out how you can go forward. And that they can offer up a lot of support and a lot of resources that may take you a long time to figure out on your own. And so that's why like your community is a really important resource for me because I've been able to meet a lot of people through connecting with your group and then different events that are happening and just networking possibilities. And I'm always meeting somebody new who has another take on something. Or I was like, oh, I didn't know this existed. Or thanks, I'll be able to tell my clients about this. But I think people should also understand with elder care mediation that it's a very common situation to be in, to be at odds with your family. Some people might be ashamed to admit that they have to go to a mediator because they don't want to say that they couldn't work things out with a brother or a sister, but it's okay. And a lot of times you'll realize it's just something that happened in the past and it's baggage that's back there that we don't need to carry into the future. But nonetheless, it needs to be heard and acknowledged so that people can move forward. And so when people are able to do that and come together and have a conversation, as sticky and messy and as difficult as it can be, you can actually get a lot of positive from that so that you can plan for the future for your loved one. And that's to me what the beauty of mediation is. I'm able to hear all the ugliness and the nastiness, the pettiness sometimes, but take from that the fact that at the end of the day, they all care about mom or dad and doing what's right for them. And then they usually are able to agree to something that's going to be really helpful for their aging parent.
Yeah, and as you are describing this, as Anna, as I'm thinking about it, it's like there's no other way to really what I like is the process that you mapped out is that if three or two or five parties have a disagreement and can't agree, having individual conversations with each of them from a neutral perspective, documenting what it is that their concerns are, and
Mhm.
then having the ability to neutral without any skeletons in the closet, sort of digest where the commonalities are, where the differences are, and have everybody kind of like hear that. Whereas, the traditional manner is, hey, let's all join together in a room and we're gonna hash it out, and there's just so much emotion there. This really does make a lot of sense, and I'm glad that we have a resource like this for families, and hopefully we can let people know that this exists. I also like letting people know that there's the threat of elder care mediation, and maybe they never hire you. Just knowing that, I could see where an adult child might say, hey, brother and sister, I'm going to call an elder care mediator. And it's like, no, no, no. Why are we doing that? We can figure this out.
Right, right, right. I guess a good way to look at it too is it's not a threat. It's actually a way to avoid court, because
No,
the whole idea is so that there isn't any litigation afterwards or aren't any more battles. There is a open communication that's established, and it may not be perfect, but it will be better than spending all that time and money litigating it in the future. So
where
don't be afraid to
mediators would
talk.
be really helpful, and I can only say this because I just came back from my visiting my daughter at her college, is in college dorms, there should be a mediator in every college dorm that's out there. And Althea says the hardest part is getting people to the table. Yeah, Althea, we talked about that earlier, that I can see where you get three people in a family that are willing to sit around a table, but it's that fourth person. And
Mhm. Right,
and like
right.
you said, Paula, that fourth person having a conversation with you is probably going to be more effective than with the brother and sister, and hopefully you can
Exactly.
bring them to the table too.
Right, exactly. Avoid the
Excellent.
ganging up on siblings
Yep.
scenario.
Well, this has been great. And I'm going to, as I mentioned, folks, this is recorded. I got all the resources. I'm going to get this recording up, and we've got Paula's contact info, and everything is there. And again, if this is of interest to you, if you're thinking about this, it seems like we've got a few people in the audience that may be thinking about this as a profession, or if you've got a loved one, reach out to Paula. I mean, she's just a great resource that can help, whether you need a mediator or you're thinking of becoming a mediator. I think that you're really an amazing resource, Paula.
Oh, why, thank you. I'm happy to help in any way. I'm always happy to guide new people who into the mediation practice. We need a lot more mediators in the world, and if we can add another one, that's great.
Okay. And one of the reasons that I was babbling there, we were talking about listening as opposed to talking, is I knew that if I just kind of started wrapping things up, another good question would come in.
Uh-oh.
And so Cheryl asks, when there was a family meeting for my father, all of us disagreed with my suggestions, so I was cut off. Now mom needs assistance and nobody is willing to step up, and I'm limited to help. What do you recommend in an environment like this?
Gosh, I think I need to know more information, to be honest with you. But I'm not sure the kind of help one needs. Is it physical? Is it financial? I guess having a conversation just for starters about what the needs might be.
And
Uh,
then, like, Paula, could Cheryl, like, do you have sort of an initial free
oh,
consultation?
yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I have for the elder care mediation, it's up to 30 minutes complimentary.
To just get a lay of the land and
Yeah,
see if it's going to be a match. So
exactly.
Cheryl, I've dropped Paula's contact info there. She did follow up and she says it's all physical.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and but Cheryl, I recommend, like, maybe type out the situation and send it in an email to Paula, so she can have the opportunity to digest it, and or give her a call, and maybe some ideas can pop up, or maybe you can figure, maybe mediation might be appropriate for your family member if we can get everybody around the table. Sounds like this is a getting people around the table issue.
Right, right. Could very well be.
So, all right, folks. Well, this has been great, and Cheryl, I love it when people are brave enough to share and be transparent about their personal stuff. I our thoughts are with you. I know that that's not uh that's a challenging situation that you're in with your family, and I hope that we can help with some resources to make it better. But Paula, thanks so much.
Thank
And
you.
I'm actually I uh Mom always liked you best. I hope that we can get you back on and maybe get that group back on and continue this conversation and learn
Okay.
more about that book for
I'll
sure.
connect you all together so that it can happen.
I love it. All right, everybody